They told me, OK, you have the skills we want to work with you. At the same time, they told me, as soon as you move a finger, we need to know and to sign it. It was really annoying. I had the impression it was related to being a woman.
How many women in Europe have a top-level job?
In Europe, I would say 35%.
20%, not more.
25%?
35%.
There must be 70%.
Only 3% of chief executives in big European companies are women. 14% sit as company board members. The situation is slowly changing, but the European Union believes at the current rate it will take 50 years to achieve gender-balanced boardrooms.
The glass ceiling, which symbolises the barrier preventing women reaching top positions, still exists all over Europe. And Marie Dominguez experienced this firsthand, and after winning an appeal for unfair dismissal, she set up her own business in Lyon.
They were restricting what I could and couldn't do. I always had to make justifications and ask before I did anything. Everything regarding the budgets and procedures had to be signed and validated beforehand, so I had very little freedom. I wasn't given enough power to perform my mission or my job.
More countries are pushing for change, whether it's encouraging businesses with self-regulating initiatives or adopting legislative solutions. The European Commission's preparing a draft legislation stating that at least 40% of boardrooms should be made up of women by 2020. Aviva Wittenberg-Cox works with executives to build more diverse companies. She thinks the quotas can raise awareness on this deep-rooted issue.
I wish we had a glass ceiling, because that's actually much better than what we do have. A glass ceiling gives everybody the impression, which is women are blocked just from the very top, which is why it's called the glass ceiling. That's actually not what I've ever seen in any company. Almost from the very first management levels, you see the percentage of men begin to rise and the percentage of women begin to drop off. That's not a glass ceiling. We call that gender asbestos.
The UK is among the EU countries stepping up attempts to address the gender gap with self-regulatory initiatives, but it's one of the strongest opponents to an EU-wide legislation on quotas. In 2007, 12% of the biggest UK companies' boards were made up of women. Today, that number stands at more than 16%. The increase is thanks to government recommendations and initiatives like the 30% Club, which works with chairmen to change business culture.
We want to achieve 30% of female representation of UK boards by 2015. And we're actually making some really good progress, having had quite a slow start. Since March of this year, 44% of the new board appointees have been female. So we're getting there, and there is definitely momentum.
Recent research has shown that closing the gender gap could boost the Eurozone's gross domestic product by up to 13%. But what are the key elements to gender-balanced businesses?
After making gender balance its goal years ago, a quarter of global management consulting group Accenture's board is made up of women, beating the British average. Fiona O'Hara is Director of Operations at the company, which uses several programs to attract, retain and advance its female employees.
So Accenture has been looking at diversity and how important it is for our business probably for more than 10 years. But one of the things that we found was women returning from maternity leave. We had a return rate of about 75%. We've now managed to increase that to 90% through putting a lot more support around those women when they are on maternity leave and when they want to come back, and being very flexible about our approach and how they return to work.
Accenture's also introduced a mentoring programme focusing on top jobs for talented, driven women.
We started a programme about a year ago, and in that programme I'm sponsor of 5 women who are high-performing women in our organisation that I spend a lot of time with, helping to coach, mentor and understand how we shape their careers within Accenture.
Thales Group specialises in aerospace, transport and security. Actively working on gender balance, 22% of its employees from all over the world are women, and 4% of 16 of the company's board members are female. That's the equivalent to 25%. Marion Broughton is Vice President of Thales UK.
As soon as I started to get positions of management, yes, you had to do a little bit more. Yes, people were looking for just to check that they'd made the right decision when they'd put a woman in that management position. And I did have to work very hard to get those promotions. But I think that I don't count those as barriers to progress.
Since 2009, Thales has been keeping close tabs on its number of top-level women and is aiming for progressive annual increases. The percentage of high-ranking female employees there has risen from 9% in 2009 to 11% in 2012.
What's important is the company takes its own initiatives, because it would be a strategic error for it not to be part of this desire to have diversity in business.
France is among the European countries that have adopted a quota law together with Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands and Spain. This means that by 2017, 40% of board members in these countries will have to be female. France has shown the fastest growth in putting women in top positions, going from 9% in 2007 to 22% in 2012. And that's 10 points up since the law was adopted last year. Though quotas might bring results, they also bring controversy, and the corporate world has voiced concern over sanctions and meritocracy.
A quota is still submitted in regards to minorities, and that may have a rather negative effect, in the same way as someone might say, you're a woman, you're in this position, and on this board ultimately because you're a woman, and you're there because there are quotas.
Vice President of the European Commission, Viviane Reding, who's championed the draft legislation, points out that quotas would be a temporary measure until a gender-balanced boardroom is achieved.
It would be completely wrong to take women in just because they are female. We need to take women in because they are talents, because they know to do the job, because they are an asset. So it is not about only the female factor, it is about the human capacity. But we do not do well if we leave part of our human capacity aside just because they are women.
Quotas for company boards might be a milestone for gender equality, but the question is, will it make any difference in how companies are run? Aviva Wittenberg-Cox explains that gender-balanced boardrooms don't necessarily mean gender-balanced business.
So we'd say the best measure of whether or not a company is gender-balanced or not is not the hotly debated corporate board that everybody's talking about right now. A much better indicator is actually the executive committee. It's who's actually running the company. Corporate boards are relatively simple to gender balance. You just have to put in a few women non-exec directors, which is what a lot of companies are doing.